So I'm going to go ahead and let them tell you the rest of the introduction of some people that shouldn't have the experience they did, but they've had first-hand accounts of what they saw, what they lived through, and possibly what we're going to be faced with in the future, and that is JoAnne and James Moriarty.
Are you going to talk about Regina first?
Yeah. First, we'd like to thank the John Birch Society for inviting us to speak. Our opportunity to continue to live.
Can you hear him back there?
Up louder. Okay. Our ability to continue to live is really based on people knowing who we are, knowing our story, keeping us in your prayers.
Louder.
Can't hear. So maybe you should take it out a little bit. Okay, I might have to-
Okay. We'll try this. Is that better? Okay. So we want to thank the society. We've had 3 great events with you all here in Texas. And we're honorary members of the John Birch Society. We've been supporters forever. JoAnne and I both acquired the Clinton Chronicles when we were barely out of diapers. And we really became full supporters of the John Birch Society when we discovered that one of your main goals is to get the United States out of any involvement in the UN and NATO. And believe me, we saw what those associations can do. And so we're going to support everything that the John Birch Society does to try to get the U.S. out of those entities. I also want to thank one of your John Birch Society brats, Regina and Bergia. She's got 4 guests here today. She's been supporting us for a long time. Her group here is called Activists for Truth, and she's been working real hard lately to try to get the fluoride out of the water here in Dallas, and she's making waves all over the country. So she should be receiving gratitude from everybody in this country, and she deserves your support as well.
I'm going to start.
You're going to start.
It's the first time I ever started. We are business people. We went to Libya. We're in the oil and gas business. We rejuvenate oil wells and clean out pipelines and do a lot of the good things, and we make an enzyme that cleans up these things. And so we went to Libya because Libya was a big country for us that needed a lot of our help. It had been closed, embargoed for, 30 years?
38 years.
38 years, and there had been no new technology. So in 2006, when they signed a treaty to open up Libya, we decided to go into Libya and see what we could find there. I'd like to give you a little history on Libya because most people don't know about Libya. Libya, for its 8,000-year history, most of it until 1969 was an occupied country, occupied by the Romans, by the Phoenicians, by the Ottoman Empire, on and on. And until 1969, they were occupied by Italy, but they also had in place a despot king that was put in Libya to run Libya for the United Kingdom, and he was a pedophile and a despot. The Libyan people at that time were basically the slaves of the Italians. They were not allowed to own any land, and all they did was work. Their average salary was about 60 dinar a year. That's $50 a year. So 11 leaders of 11 tribes got together and decided to throw over the old despot king, and it was a bloodless coup because he was a bad guy. He knew it, and he ran off. At that point in time, those 11 leaders decided they would appoint a young man, very charismatic, very intelligent, Muammar Gaddafi, to be their leader. And at that time, Gaddafi handed all the land over to all the Libyans who were working any land for the Italians. That land became theirs. And that was the first time in their history they ever owned their own land. In 1969, Libya was the poorest, least developed country in Africa. In 2011, when NATO went in and attacked, it was the most developed country in Africa, and the people had the best life. You can tell them about that.
Now, we never did any business with Gaddafi or any of his families. We don't really know the man, but we saw him do a lot of things in his country, and the Libyan people liked him. So what we know and what we learned was that this is Tripoli. It was a beautiful, developed city. The people in Libya had no debt. The country of Libya had no debt. Libya had $241 billion in cash and cash equivalents in the Fed system. They had 150 billion euros in Euroclear. They had 39 billion in cash in the country. They had 179 tons of gold, 2,000 tons of silver, and many other hard assets in the country. They used about 49% of their oil and gas income to subordinate the government costs. The rest of the money was being participated out for the people. For example, gasoline was 44 cents a gallon. That cost the government about $800 million a year to have the gasoline available for those people at that price. Every newlywed couple received a gift from the government of $46,000 the day they got married. Each child received a $5,000 gift from the government. Your first car cost you half of dealer invoice. The government was building 640,000 new condominiums. They were 2,000 to 2,700 square foot in size. It cost you 10% of your salary for 20 years, and then it was yours. All utilities were paid for everybody. That was gas, electricity, water, sewer, etc. Hospitalization paid, and if you could not get the medical care you needed in Libya, then the government paid for you to have your medical care taken care of outside the country. They also paid your travel expenses and travel expenses for a family member to go with you. The schooling was paid. The schooling was paid to whatever extent your brain would support. And we knew a young man, he was getting his doctorate in England. He had a wife and 4 kids. Besides all his expenses paid, all his tuition, books, and fees, his monthly stipend was 4,950 pounds. That's about $7,500 a month living expenses while he was studying. So the people of Libya had a really good life. And
It's only 5.5 million.
5.5 million people in the country with that amount of wealth and that amount. They've got about 50 billion barrels of recoverable oil, about that equivalent amount of gas as well. 5.5 million people. You can see how they're a very rich country.
Show some of the,
Here's
some of the
Roman ruins, pristine. The biggest city the Romans ever built was in Libya, larger than Rome, and this was Leptis Magna. This is one of their amphitheaters, and you could go down and walk in the bowels of the amphitheaters and see their systems below and their spas and everything as well. Next one. This is one of the jewel lakes in the desert. They've got 3 of those. Each one's a different color, real unique area. Now then, along comes NATO. And why NATO? Because Libya needed to be blown up. First thing, the United States is bound and determined to have a war with China. And they did not want China to have access to the natural resources of Africa. So the United States was forming AFRICOM, and that's military control of Africa. Libya, South Africa, 6 other countries said not ever going to happen. So, of course, the United States wanted to blow up Libya so that AFRICOM could be a reality. The toilet paper bankers, Federal Reserve and the Rothschild Group and Bilderbergs and One World Order folks did not want Libya to continue their efforts to form the African Bank, which was a gold-backed currency for the continent of Africa. All the Arab countries had signed up as members of the African Bank. Half of Africa had signed up. A gold-backed currency with the resources of Africa, the continent of Africa behind it, would have destroyed the toilet paper bankers. So, of course, they wanted to blow Libya up for that reason. Gaddafi, since he was forced to retire according to the Treaty of 2006, he looked at all the treaties that had been violated by all the European countries in Africa, and so he was a big African Union guy. He started a class action suit against all those violated treaties. The attorney said that suit had legs. It was for $7 trillion. It had been presented into world court. So, of course, the Europeans wanted to alleviate that problem. They couldn't afford any piece of that kind of a debt. In addition to that, France and England had put up a communications satellite, and that was about 20 years ago. They were charging the African countries $500 million a year in advance, plus a per-minute charge to use that system. African countries had appealed to World Bank and IMF for a loan to put up their own satellite. 14 years it was never approved, so Libya put up $300 million, African Development Bank put up $47 million, some other money came forward, so they put up their own satellite. One of the demands of France and England now since Libya's been blown up, is that they be gifted that satellite so they can go back and get that $500 million a year in upfront money. So the reasons that Libya was blown up had nothing to do with anything except one world order folks getting rid of a country where the people were really enjoying the freedoms and the benefits of their natural resources. And the people of Libya were happy. There were about at least 85% of the people supported that government. And in order to cause a revolution, the United States brought in their paid mercenaries, Al-Qaeda. 250,000 of them were brought into Libya to effect this false flag operation. And the false flag in Egypt, the false flag in Tunis were both preludes to the false flag in Libya. And the war games about the takeover of Libya were conducted in 2010. And there's a long interview with Dennis Kucinich on our DVD where he explains all that, including establishing the no-fly zone, 11 ships in the Mediterranean, et cetera, and that was supposed to start the 17th of March. It actually started the 17th of February. So it was not a popular uprising. It was absolutely a false flag coup d'etat that was planned and executed many, many years in advance. This is Al-Qaeda.
NATO joined hands with 4% of the Libyan people that were actually in exile, and those people are radical Islamists. The Libyan government was anti-radical Islamists. In fact, if you were a radical Islamist, you were in prison in Libya. So most of them lived in exile. Abdul Hakim Belhaj was in Guantanamo, one of their main guys they joined hands with, and one of John McCain's best friends, self-proclaimed. So when they joined hands with those people, they immediately opened a central bank in Benghazi the first week of the revolution, and Saudi Arabia put $1 billion in that bank so that they could fund these 250,000 Al-Qaeda mercenaries from Yemen and everywhere, all over the Middle East, Algeria, everywhere.
They were paid, the mercenaries were paid $2,500 to join and $2,500 a month to fight. They were given a bonus of $1,000 every time they killed a Libyan soldier. So these absolutely were mercenaries.
Here you see John McCain. He showed up in Benghazi a bunch of times with a lot of radical Islamists. There's Chris Stevens right behind him. Chris Stevens was the gun runner for the mercenaries, armed them, funded them, and helped train them. John McCain is there putting his arms, seen on many media, seen him putting his arms around Al-Qaeda saying, "These guys are my heroes." So anywhere you see John McCain show up, you're going to see some of these Al-Qaeda mercenaries show up and start a false revolution.
There's two guys that you can follow. One of them is Bernard Levy, and he's a billionaire Frenchman that replaced Henry Kissinger as the spokesperson for the One World Order guys, the Rothschild group. And when he shows up in a country the following week, this sorry garbage, John McCain will show up and there will be a revolution next. And this country will be supplying weapons to the bad guys. The United States supplied weapons through Qatar into Libya, with the gun runner being Chris Stevens. And after the no-fly zone had been established, the United States saw fit to send in 20,000 man-pad rockets. Those are shoulder-mounted, laser-guided land-to-air missiles. 20,000 of them after the no-fly zone had been established. And according to our pilots, after 2 days, Libya couldn't get a mosquito in the air. So tell me why we needed to send 20,000 man-pad rockets to Libya. Now this government is trying to send another bunch of man-pad rockets to Syria after the rebels there have, for all practical purposes, lost their fight.
Those are the reasons.
These are the reasons. I covered those earlier, but the African Bank, and incidentally that bank is in existence. It's housed on the Comores Island, and we've heard rumblings that Putin's now trying to join hands with the African Bank. He's established a gold-backed currency in Russia, and that'll give him about 70 or 80 countries that are part of a gold-backed currency scheme that he's putting together. This is the support of the Libyan people in Libya. This is during the middle of the fighting.
Yeah. On July 1st, 2011, 2 million Libyans, that's 2 million out of 5.5 million, showed up in Green Square in Tripoli to support their government. We were there. And the sad thing that happened there is that this Green Square, where they showed up all the time, all over Libya, supporting their green flag, their country, was never reported. What they did instead was make a false green square in Qatar, and they put the black and red and green flag over there saying, these are all the Libyan people supporting the rebels. That was a complete movie, and we know that's true because we met one of the reporters who was there. And he said, you can't believe it, they have a movie set over in Qatar. The Libyan people, yeah, this is what happened. The Libyan people were not fighting any war. They were unhappy about the war and they didn't fight. So they were bombed, literally, just as people sitting on the ground. In Tripoli, which was a big support center for the current government, NATO bombed every day. Cluster bombs, depleted uranium bombs, and mostly at night. And this caused miscarriages and people to die from fright, and people killed. NATO killed over 500,000 Libyans. They bombed hospitals, hotels, power plants, water supply plants, food supplies, and on top of that, NATO embargoed Tripoli. Now, those are innocent civilians. It's illegal internationally for them to embargo food and water and medicine and gasoline, which they did to the Libyan people. Had to drive to Tunisia to get food. None of that was ever reported.
This photograph we took ourselves. Oops. This photograph we took ourselves, and that is clearly a cluster bomb. All the munitions that were blown up in Libya were depleted uranium. Libya had one of the highest health records for infants in the world. They now are experiencing 25% deformity, so bad that the babies don't live the first day. They're experiencing all kinds of cancers that nobody's ever seen there before. The incidence of high blood pressure and all kinds of other diseases are up 300 to 500%. 2 million people now live in exile. 1 million are homeless inside the country. That leaves 2 million that are living in their homes but in a state of anarchy, and the country is owned by Al-Qaeda. Now these things were so hard for us to imagine because we've been big supporters of our government forever, and we saw these things. We're eyewitnesses to these events.
This is a big one, eyewitness.
This one, JoAnne and I were there when the cordite was still in the air. This was a home in Sorman, one of the original 11 people that overthrew the old government. And the man that was the patriarch of this family had a brain tumor about 4 years earlier, and he was good for driving his tractor and things like that, you know, but of no threat to anybody. And there were 17 rockets hit this property. And they were laser-guided rockets, and they killed these innocent children. And we were asked to go into the morgue that morning to photograph this because they said, these are JoAnne's pictures. They went all over the world. They said, none of the reporters here will tell the truth about what happened
and
there.
There's the bomb.
Yeah, that's
the serial number of the bomb.
We have many photographs of bomb fragments with U.S. serial numbers on them. And when we showed those to the intelligence agencies that were in our home, they all cringed because, see, there's not supposed to be any evidence of what this country did to that country. This is Sirte. This was the homeland of the Gaddafi tribe. There were about 300,000 people there. The United States deployed fuel-air explosives. That's a two-part bomb. The first part disperses phosphor over a large area, and then it's ignited with a second part. It burns at 6,000 degrees. It increases atmospheric pressure 20 times. All the air, oxygen is soaked up in the air. Everything is burned to a crisp. It will kill every man, woman, child, cockroach, and everything. It's a poor man's nuclear device, and that's a very modern city that we completely destroyed. We use fuel-air explosives. I'm talking about our government here. It deployed fuel-air explosives, absolutely criminal acts, illegal.
In the protection of civilians.
And this was all under the auspices of protecting the innocent people in Libya. Protecting the innocent people, we've killed, I think the number now is about 600,000. They started a genocide the first week that Al-Qaeda is in there. They made the declaration they're going to kill all the blacks in the country because those were the mercenaries that Gaddafi brought into the country. That was not true. Libya was 30 to 35% black. The blacks were the biggest producers of agricultural products in the country. They were first-class citizens. In fact, Libya was colorblind. In every single family, you saw black, beige, brown, everything in between. We never saw a family that did not have black members in them. So this genocide of blacks has not been contested here in the United States at all. Not anybody. And JoAnne and I have gone to all the black leaders trying to get them to do something about this. There's 128, you'll see a picture of a mass grave later.
This is before and after.
These are before and after photos, but of the mass graves, there's 128 mass graves in Libya full of black bodies.
And white men, Arabs, but mostly black.
And our good friend, the bishop, he knows all about this, and his DVD demonstrates these things as well.
They genocide blacks. Over 50% of all black pregnancies end in abortion in America.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
As you see the pictures before and after, most of these photographs, JoAnne and I took ourselves. We traveled all over Libya. Let me tell you what kind of success we had in Libya. We've treated successfully over 7,000 oil wells worldwide. We do a real sophisticated medical grade DNA manipulation of microbes, and we kill all the living portion off, and our enzyme does neat things. Rejuvenate oil wells, we clean up pipelines, sludge pits, chicken fat, PCBs, etc. And we looked at Libya as a new market, and we went there, and our first trip into Libya, we signed a contract. This is within 2 weeks of our first trip in Libya. We signed a contract to rejuvenate 2,500 monster wells. That was about $600 million to $1 billion of our product. First trip in.
Because the zone size.
The zones are 1,200 feet thick. Those are monster wells. So we absolutely were proactive to go do business in Libya, and we traveled all over Libya. Every time we went back there, and we were there 17 times over the 4-year period from January of 2007 until February of 2011. We were there 17 times. We were never there less than 30 days, many times as much as 3 months at a time. So we got to know the Libyan people real well. We went all over their country. We signed more contracts to clean up huge sludge pits and things like that in the country. So we got to know the country and the people real well.
And one thing I forgot to say is that in the 1970s, Gaddafi emancipated the women. He threw out the part of the Quran that the Ayatollah Khomeini put in, the radical part where you have to kill the infidels. He said that's not part of the Quran, and for that he had a fatwa put on him for 20 years, a kill order. But the thing he did that I liked and that I saw in Libya was he emancipated women. Women were allowed to be doctors, lawyers, in the government, teachers. They were in the military. They could do anything they want. They were free to drive. They were free to move around, not be married, be married. They had better divorce laws in Libya than they have here. If a woman got divorced and her husband did not support her, then his family had to. And if his family did not, then his tribe had to. And she was taken care of, and so were her kids. It was by law.
I don't think we ever saw a shop that sold beekeeper outfits in Libya.
No.
May have been some, but never saw it. So the burqas were not a thing you saw there. We were asked to go back in April of 2011 to head an NGO fact-finding commission. That's us. That's the office of the fact-finding commission. And we actually were trapped in Tripoli for 100 days, all of May and through the summer. We stayed in Libya longer than we should have because the Pope invited or asked us to bring in a shipload of medicine and medical supplies. This is our first meeting we had with the tribal leaders of Libya. First time we saw the tribal leaders. We'd been doing business with them, but didn't know they were tribal leaders before that time. And we became very close to the tribal leaders. Libya had two houses, if you would, in their government. They had an elected Congress, and then they had the General Secretary to the tribes, and those General Secretary was 200 members. And then they had 40 tribal guys above those, 10 from each north, south, east, and west, then a group of 5 above that, and then the supreme leader of the tribes. And because we were there and we knew that the government of Libya was a burned card, they were receiving so much negative press here, the truth was just not in any reports you ever heard. So we kind of adopted the tribes, and we would go to all the tribal meetings we could because there were 2 white faces in the front row that the cameras always landed on us. And so the tribes and the people of Libya knew that we were trying to support them. And really, we were guilty of telling the Libyan people that they had the right to determine their own government. Can you imagine that? And because of that, we were put on the Al-Qaeda kill list. And in the end, when they attacked Tripoli, and the name of their operation was Mermaid Dawn, and we were sitting in the 21st floor of our hotel that was right on the Mediterranean, We saw 2 of these attack gunships coming in low with their guns blaring. We could hear the third one. The first hour of Mermaid Dawn, they killed 1,300 men, women, and children on the street and wounded 5,000. That's in the first hour of that attack on Tripoli.
And why did they have to stop Tripoli?
And
The Constitution.
the reason they finally attacked is on the 17th of August, the tribes had completed their new constitution for Libya. We were sitting with Sheikh Ali, the supreme leader of the tribes, when he received the new constitution, and it was to be voted on by every man, woman, and child in Libya. Even the radicals were being offered a vote on their constitution. And of course, that didn't fit the agenda of the One World Order people for the Libyans to produce their own constitution, so they had to accelerate their attack on the country, and they invaded Tripoli in ways you cannot imagine. And what we saw, besides these attack helicopters, were a nonstop stream of these little trucks full of Al-Qaeda. That's right out of our window of our hotel, nonstop shiploads coming into Tripoli, full of these gangs. These little trucks had anti-aircraft weapons on the back, nonstop, and they were killing everybody.
This was all NATO support.
This was all NATO. This was all the U.S. supported attack on this country. Next slide. That's the hotel we were in. This is in the lobby of our hotel. This is Al-Qaeda actually in the lobby of our hotel.
Coming into the lobby, it was outside.
And we knew we had to get out of there. We received no support at all from the government of the United States. We appealed several times to help us get out of that country. They didn't give us the time of day. The Russian ambassador finally invited us, or put our names on a list of a rescue ship that was coming from Malta to take the dignitaries that were trapped inside Tripoli. He put our names on the list so that we could be extracted from the country. Go to the next slide.
We went up and down the coast, that's why I had
JoAnne was, go back, we were going up and down the coast. The hotel loaned us their little van. And it started off JoAnne and myself, and then the German FIFA coach, their soccer coach, Anthony Hay, approached us in the lobby. He said, "Are y'all Americans? Yeah, are you going to get out of this place? We're going to try." He said, "Can I go with you?" Next thing was a Bahraini prince. Then there was a ne'er-do-well from Texas. There was a Filipino gal that worked for the hotel. So that was the sister of the president of Mauritania. And so that was our group of 7. The hotel loaned us their van, and we were trying to find the rescue ship. And so we were going up and down this coast.
This road right here.
42 miles east, and every 100 yards there was an Al-Qaeda checkpoint. Armed thugs, Allah Akbar, the 2 men driving the van from the hotel were telling them that we were reporters. And since the reporters were always lying for them, they were happy about that. They didn't know who we were at the time. And this went on all day. We're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, trying to find the rescue ship. Well, we didn't know that the rescue ship had tried to come in. It was fired upon, and it was more than 3 miles out. So the second time, we ended up back in the port of Tripoli. We were held inside, and it was a hellish thing to get into that port. We were held there for over an hour, and in the end, these about 20 or 30 trucks came in. All the young men were armed. They put AK-47s in our face, and the big, tall, hard-looking guy had a list with our names on it. He said in English, "We know who you are. Your game's up." And they took us to their torture center in that hotel.
The Radisson.
That's the Radisson. No electricity, no lights, no food, no water, nothing. They put us in the lobby instead of taking us to their mezzanine torture center. They were bringing in soldiers that were wounded, and the elevator would, emergency power only worked on the elevator. They were taking these soldiers up. We could hear them. We couldn't see them, and they were doing things, these men, we heard sounds coming from human beings nobody ever wants to hear. And we were there a long time, and they kept bringing in officials, Al-Qaeda officials and GNC, their phony government. They kept coming in. They were looking at the prize, these 7 people that they had captured. And finally, this big, fat, bald-headed imam, who was the imam for Tripoli, wearing a dress, he came in, looked down his nose at us, and said something in Arabic and went off. The 3 people that spoke Arabic all turned very, very green at that point, And they then offered to give us back our passports. I had been adamant about getting our passports back. I kept saying, we've been supporting you all. We're Americans. You need to give us our passports back. We need to get out of here. And we actually got out of Libya with 3 miracles. The first one was that time a man from our hotel came over and he said, I'm going to be driving the van now. And so he sent the driver back. He was the IT guy from our hotel. Spoke perfect English, never very friendly. And I kept saying we were going to go to the rescue ship, which would have been east from the hotel, from their torture center. And he said, no, I'm taking the van back to the hotel, which would have been west. And so I said, no, we're getting out of this place. He took JoAnne to the side and he said, I've gotten to know you and your husband. You're good people. You're trying to help Libya. He was an Al-Qaeda man. He was the spy inside our hotel. And he said, what you did not hear the imam say is they've set up a kill zone for you 2 blocks away. You're to be killed and chopped up and burned. It's going to be blamed on Gaddafi. And I'm going to try to take this van back the other direction through the back roads and help you all get back to the hotel. JoAnne said, you need to tell my husband that he's a little thick. And so he took me over to the side. He told me the same story, and I said, gosh, we're going back to where we'd started. That was the first miracle. The second miracle, the man that was heading the rescue ship, this one, which was a converted car carrier, and it was an IOM rescue ship. They were taking refugees back to Benghazi. Well, hell, Benghazi was the head of the snake. Last place we wanted to go, and this guy, he was also Al-Qaeda. He knew the sister of the president of Mauritania, and he said, we'd seen him for months. We knew him. Muhammad was his name. We'd seen him for months, and he said, look, he said, I'm part of this group, but you all need to get out of Libya. You need to get out of Tripoli. You're on their kill list. They don't know where you are now. But he said, there's nobody left in Benghazi. All the bad guys in Benghazi are over here killing people in Tripoli. Benghazi is empty. And this rescue ship's going back to Benghazi. He said, I will make sure that I get you all the way onto the ship. So we got on this rescue ship. We were on there 48 hours. It was a trip from hell. It was hot. It was in the Mediterranean. Again, no food, no water, no air conditioning. The only thing they had to eat was moldy bread and outdated juice. There were 2 bathrooms for the whole ship, about 300 people on it. You drink the juice and immediately you were doing the green apple quick step. And so that was pretty tough. 48 hours later, we arrived in Tripoli, and this man, in Benghazi, pardon me. And this man, he said, I'm making arrangements when you get to Benghazi to be taken to a hotel rather than to one of the refugee camps on the border with Egypt, because they will have your name there and you all will disappear. So we were taken to the Tbilisi Hotel. And in the lobby of that hotel, not in the lobby, in that hotel, there was a U.S. consulate, temporary consulate set up in that hotel. So joining our U.S., we had our passports. We went upstairs to see if we could get help from that consulate. That guy barely even spoke English. He says, I'm not here to help any Americans. I'm only here to help the rebels. And we said, but we need help. And he barely spoke English. He said, I can give you no help. So we went upstairs to the European Union office to see if we could get some help from them. Nice guy. The guard he had out front had been studying petroleum engineering at Texas A&M University. He was a nice guy. The man inside European Union, no, sorry, you got the wrong color passport. We can't help you. So we went back downstairs, and the concierge in that hotel had called the ranking official for the phony government, who was the number 3 man in that phony government, and told him there's a group of, we were down to 6, the Filipino gal couldn't stand to be with us anymore. Scared her off. And so he said, there's some people here that are not the normal people we see, and they need some help. So he sent his security guy in, and really because the Bahraini prince was with us, they were impressed with him. So then the man came over. He was dressed in a suit and tie, spoke perfect English, well-educated guy. And he spoke to us first, and the culture there is that you first establish who you know of their family, and if you're a member of their family or whatever.
Their
Well,
tribe or whatever.
his tribe, the best friends we had in Libya, were members of that tribe that he was a member of. So we talked to him, we found out what tribe he was from. We said, oh, we've got good friends in that tribe. We gave their names and all the family. He said, yes, we know them. He said, they're not ranking in the tribe, but that's okay. That bought us his support. And he said, how long has it been since y'all have eaten? We said, 5 days. And he said, well, it was still Ramadan. He said, I'm inviting you to breakfast here in the hotel that evening. And he said, then I will see that my security man stays with you. We're going to try to get you on an airplane that's taking wounded soldiers to Tunisia tonight. Since he didn't have our name on the list yet, that was the third miracle. God made sure the communications between Tripoli and Benghazi weren't happening, so they didn't have us on their kill list in Benghazi yet. So he was good to his word. We got, his security man took us to the airport. That's our group inside the executive lounge. His man put us at the first of the list, walked us through, and then all the people who are trying to get out of Benghazi were upset. So to protect us, he took us to the executive lounge, and that's inside the executive lounge at the airport in Benghazi. And at 2:30 that night, the plane finally took off. It was the oldest, raggedy-ass 727 you've ever seen. The doors were missing on the bins. When you look down between your legs, you could see daylight. And it flew like this, and as bad as it was a magic carpet ride to Tunisia. And after we got to Tunisia, we made our own way home because, again, the government of the United States would not help us at all. We had no money left. We had no money left. Our credit cards had been taken, and another miracle, though it was not as dramatic, got us into Rome, and then out of Rome into England, and then England back to Houston. And we landed in Houston. I was detained by the authorities for 3 hours and grilled. There were 3 screens that I was seeing the back of, and one FBI agent, and he grilled me for 3 hours. They let JoAnne go on through. They took my luggage apart. They never bothered JoAnne. She had secreted on her person 200 gigabytes of all the evidence we've got of the atrocities the United States committed using UN and NATO in Libya. And they didn't find anything on me, but they want to know who paid for our trip. Well, we paid our own trip. Who did this? 3 hours of this mess, and they had to let me go. This is now who owns Libya. These gangs of armed assassins and thugs and psychopaths and murderers, all trained by the U.S. CIA. And the CIA is the leg. I mean, the Al-Qaeda is the leg of the CIA. Muslim Brotherhood is the leg, the murderous leg of the British MI5. And those are the guys that own Libya. And they were given not only the country, but they were given over $100 billion of cash. So now then, here's these psychopaths with money, a country, oil and gas income, and they decided that they were so big now that they would bite the hand that fed them, so they turned on the United States. And so the U.S. Was trying to find intel on what was going on there. And JoAnne and I, since we got back, we tried, JoAnne was calling 8 or 10 hours a day to every politician, trying to tell we were looking for a God-fearing politician. We were trying to tell them how wrong-footed we were in Libya and how we were supporting really the bad guys, and we'd seen it. We were eyewitnesses to these atrocities. Nobody wanted to hear the story. Nobody wanted to talk to us. And guys like this is John McCain's blood brother. John McCain received an award from this sorry piece of garbage in 2012. John McCain has joined hands and hugged Al-Qaeda in Libya. He's gone to Syria and al-Nusra and said those are his brothers. Go ahead. This guy owns the passport office in Libya.
Right here. His brother was killed by a drone.
He's sorry. Since October of 2011, Al-Qaeda has owned the passport office in Libya. They take the best English-speaking radicals from all over the world. They bring them into Libya. They give them a new name, give them a Libyan passport, fund them in the United States with a $4 million bank account, and they're sending 300 to several thousand a month into the United States, and this has been going on since 2011. this scares me to death. And when we told the intelligence agencies that were in our home, why are you allowing these people to come into the United States? There has to be some reason the government is doing that. Well, what do you recommend we do about it? And I said, take every Libyan that's come to the United States since October of 2011. If they've got a bank account with $4 million in it, waterboard the bastard until he tells you who he's working for. Oh, we can't do that. That'd be profiling. But, you know, you've got to understand, since October of 2011 till today, thousands every month coming in the United States. For what purpose? These are now the top wanted criminals from Interpol. All of them in Libya.
This guy has all of Chris Stevens' belongings. This guy right here, Wassam bin Hamid, this guy, he has all of Chris Stevens' belongings. And we know that because the tribes told us, the tribal leaders that we talk to every day. They said, this is the man you want to get, because our people have seen what he has. He has his Chris Stevens wallet, all his documents, all his paperwork, everything. And they told the intelligence agencies this. We told them that, and the intelligence agencies said, oh, we don't think this guy's a bad guy. I said, well, that's all we can do then. But Libya has become the head of all the leaders of Al-Qaeda now, the most wanted in the world, where before there was none of them there.
Tell your association with Dr. Corsi.
Oh, after 2000, I was calling Washington, D.C. every day, trying to tell people, anybody, you can't get through the gatekeepers. I called Michelle Bachmann, I called Mike Lee, I called everybody I could think of. I called Democrats, I called Republicans. And finally, I got through to Dr. Corsi, Jerome Corsi, in the news. I sent him, I had been sending big long emails about who we were and what we knew, and I never got an answer. So I just sent him a short couple lines, and I said, if you're interested in what Obama did in Africa, in North Africa, and also in Kenya, because I had that information, I said, let me know. And he emailed me right back and he said, I'm interested, call me, and he gave me his private number. And from that point forward, he began to take intelligence from us, and he's written about 30 articles with our intelligence now. But this is back to the black genocide. This is
That's one of 128 mass graves.
Anyway. The reason we get the intelligence from the tribes is because they trust us, and the 2 million that are in exile, after Chris Stevens was killed, they sent us a document, and that document said that they would join hands with all the other tribes and all their tribes inside Libya to clean Libya if the United States would just stop supporting Al-Qaeda in Libya. And after that was done, they would join the tribes in Saudi Arabia, the tribes in Egypt, the tribes all over Africa and North and the Middle East, and they would clean radical Islamists worldwide. And they made that offer, and they stamped it and sealed it. And I told them, and Jimmy told them, I said, we don't have any personality. Who am I to take this to Washington, D.C. and give it to them? You have to have some kind of personality. And they said, okay, we're going to appoint you as our official spokespersons. So we were appointed as the Libyans' official spokespersons at that time.
JoAnne still gets intelligence from him every day. That's Sheikh Ali Lockwell, and he's the supreme leader of all the tribes. We get intelligence from him every day. Beginning in March of last year, 4 intelligence agencies began to then come into our home at our invitation to find out what was going on in Libya, because they admitted they had no intel there. And that's Dr. Corsi. That's one of the articles. There have been 3 documents that we've provided to Dr. Corsi that have been read into the congressional record. There's another 8 in line to be read in. This one is the security report that Morsi is head of Ansar al-Sharia and coordinated and financed the attack on Benghazi. Morsi, the leader of Egypt.
At that time.
This is the second document, and this is the leaders of Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt would go to the U.S. Embassy in Cairo and receive cash payments of $350,000 to $850,000. That's their signature. They're now on trial for their lives as U.S. spies. And these are the heads of Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
This is a huge document. This shows
Come
the
next
Obama
one.
administration.
We need to, okay, this is you tell this story.
Okay. On April, the U.S. intelligence agency started coming into our home at our invitation. The first person that introduced us to one was Tara Dahl. She's the aide to Michelle Bachmann. And we were passing intelligence to him, and then a defense intelligence agent came into our house, and after that an FBI, and then after that a CIA. But while this was going on in April of 2013, I think it was April 24th, we got a call from our Libyan tribal leaders, and they said this is top urgent. Whenever they have something that needs to be done fast, they say that. And they said there is a ship disguised as a fishing vessel on the Mediterranean, and it's full of weapons of mass destruction. This ship is sent from Turkey, paid for by al-Zawahiri, and it's heading for the northern port in Libya, eastern port. That would be Tobruk or Darna. And he said when it gets there, it will be unloaded by the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. It will be taken across Libya, into Egypt, across Egypt into the Gaza, underground into Gaza, and then it will be used against Israel. He said it's on the open sea now. They're waiting for it. They can get it if you tell them to go get it. It's on the open seas. So I called the one guy. He was Saturday, he didn't work. So I called the other guy, and he said, well, you know, I have contacts in the Mossad, and they could go get it, but he said, I can't pass intelligence. It's illegal for me to pass intelligence out of this country. And I said, well, then don't pass it. Give me his name. I'll pass it. It's my intelligence. I don't work for them. And Jimmy says I shamed him, but he finally said, okay, I'll send the message. And about 2 hours later, he called us back, and he said, I got a smiley face on my phone. And I said, what does that mean? He said, what do you think that means? They got the ship. So we called our tribal leaders, and they said, oh, the Muslim Brotherhood are going crazy. They've sent little boats out to try to find it. It won't answer their calls. They've lost the ship. So that was one good thing that happened while we were doing that.
Now, that also flies in the face of the belief that the Muslims and Jews are in mortal combat all the time. Our tribal guys said, we don't want to see anybody else innocent killed. So they provided that information to save lives in Israel.
And then we can talk about
this is Chris Stevens. Now then, we know, JoAnne and I know, the three coordinators for the attack on that mansion in Benghazi. The families of these three guys have outed them because they were ashamed of what they did. We've got their names, addresses, and phone numbers. We know who the head of Ansar al-Sharia was in Benghazi. There has been a $10 million reward by the State Department since January a year ago for information leading to the coordinators, etc. We've been trying to give it to them. They don't want it. And I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about Ted Cruz. I'm talking about Louis Gohmert. I'm talking about Darrell Issa. I'm talking about every single politician. Now, Regina Birch, that I mentioned earlier, she'd been after Pete Sessions like stink on hooey because he had been blocking the Benghazi investigation, he and Boehner. And so we cornered him one night. It was raining like it was last night at an event. He was going to have he carried his gun with him. They were having a shooting range. And so we cornered him, and we had an hour-and-a-half meeting with Pete Sessions. We started telling him our story, and he said, interesting, do you have any of those intelligence guys that were in your home at your invitation? Can you call any of them? JoAnne says, yeah. So she called the one that was the head of it, or that was the interrogator from Defense Intelligence Agency. Incidentally, he's claimed to be the #1 U.S. interrogator. JoAnne called him.
His names are all on our CD.
All their names and every detail is on our DVD. She called him. He said, oh, hi, JoAnne, how are you? She said, I'm sitting with Congressman Pete Sessions. He'd like to talk to you. Okay. And she handed the phone to Pete. He said, this is my private number. Call me back in 15 minutes. That's so he could verify that was Pete Sessions' private number. He called back in 15 minutes. Pete walked outside, had about a 20-minute conversation with him. He came back in. He said, that guy's real. And he said, more than that, you all are real. And he said, I'm going to find, he then sat down with us another hour and took every detail of what happened and all the intelligence agencies that were in our home, what information we gave him, et cetera. He said, I'm going to find out from the heads of these intelligence agencies why they have made you and your wife their best friends instead of attacking you. And about 2 weeks later, he called back and he said, I called the head of the DIA into my office, and he said, I wanted you to know that everything we talked about, everything you said has been verified, that you've been blacklisted by this government, that you've been soft-killed by these intelligence agencies, that you've been alienated from your family and business associates, that you've been ruined financially. He said they verified every bit of that. He said, in addition to that, he said that all the intelligence you all have provided has been 100% accurate, and they don't know how in the world two people sitting in the Woodlands, Texas, can get intelligence about anything going on in North Africa, and they can't get it, and we can get it off of a telephone call.
Now, the other thing that happened when these intelligence agencies were coming into our home, we told them that either they needed to do something with the intelligence, that Libyans are putting their lives at risk to gather this intelligence. The Libyans were willing to put trackers on Al-Qaeda leader cars and other things. Of course, there was no money for that. They don't do that. So we said, if you're just going to be a vacuum cleaner, come in here and take the information and go away, then we don't need to spend any more time. And the last person that came in then was the Blaze. Tara Dahl called me back and she said, Joe Weasel of the Blaze, Glenn Beck's production company, would like to do a documentary on you people because nobody escapes Al-Qaeda. Your story is bigger than Argo. So we said, fine, we'd be happy to do that. Joe Weasel called. They came in. They brought Joe Weasel, his second in command, another lady, and they brought a CIA lady with them. Now, they asked me if they could bring security for us because they said, you need to have some security. Excuse me. And we said, sure. And so they brought her in. Her name was Nikki Barakal. And she listened to us. She listened. We gave them a 6-hour dissertation on us. We showed them some of our proof. They wanted all of our proof. I didn't give them that. And they said that Glenn Beck would want to have us on his show twice, that the documentary would air June 16th. That was last
2 hours.
That was last May 2013. And they left. They were going to bring back their camera crew in 2 days. Well, we never heard from him, so I called Joe Weasel. I had his private phone. And I said, what's happening? He didn't answer. The person who called me back was Nikki Barakal, the CIA lady. And she said, I have decided to kill this project. And I said, why? She said, it's too sensitive for Glenn Beck. I said, but you're CIA. You know, she says, no, it's my call. It's my call. And she said, I'm calling it off. And you need to continue talking to the intelligence agencies. And you need to forget about Libya and not say anything else. And if you don't forget about Libya, your life.
She said, you need to,
Yeah.
she said, you need to forget about Libya. You need to start your life over today. And if you don't, you won't have a life. And I said, that sounds like a threat. She said, you stand down, do exactly what I'm telling you, or you won't have a life. So at that point in time, we knew we had a threat by our government.
And we went public.
So we started going public at that time. Before that time, we never spoke to any news agency, no
Other than
radio or
Dr.
anything. We
Corsi.
started, now Dr. Corsi, yes, but that was always done without any credit to us at all. We started going on the radio, we started doing seminars. We've been doing seminars from here all the way to Northern California and back. And they threatened us 3 times since then. The last threats have been because we've been putting out the names and details of the intelligence agencies that came into our home. And those sorry people were giving us false names, and they threatened our lives in our own home. They have admitted to blacklisting us, soft killing us. We used to have 3 properties, a big home in Oregon, a ranch in Arizona, a home in the Woodlands. They've destroyed us. We sold everything we could. We had 30 scientists and engineers workforce. We're now homeless. We have no money. We cannot get a job. Anytime we've tried to get a job, they've called and made sure that the job was not available to us. We're productive people. We're racehorses in the business world. We can't get a job. I'm a car guy. We sold all antique cars that I'd rebuilt, sold all our jewelry, sold everything we had that was liquid because we're going to get a job. We're productive folks. I thought I was too old and fat. For that reason, couldn't get a job. No, we couldn't get a job. I finally went to headhunters, and each headhunter brought forward a job as the CEO of an international company. Then the jobs were pulled after about a week. Didn't know why. Well, all of it became crystal clear in that 2-week period. A year ago this time, she said we'd been blacklisted and soft-killed. Our Kuwaiti, we have close working relationships with the Kuwaitis for 25 years. We had a contract with one of the princes to do the norm cleanup for the entire country. That's naturally occurring radioactive material. And it would have been about $150 million worth of our product. Well, 2 years ago, the prince stopped talking to us. The people who were here in the United States to deal with us. That was our backstop. In this same period of time, when Nikki Barakal threatened to kill us, I said, Sabi, what about our business? Why can't we? He said, well, you know, it's political. I said, what do you mean political? He said, well, he said, it's Libya. And I said, Libya? Hell, Libya's blown up. We lost everything in Libya. Well, you know, your government called the prince and said that we cannot do any business with
This would
you.
be the State Department.
So that would be the State Department blew up our opportunities in Kuwait. We also, the first job was pulled, the second job was pulled, the third job, JoAnne and I went to the Between the Jobs ministry in the Woodlands, Texas. It's the biggest between jobs ministry in the United States. And one of the men there, he said, one of my best friends has developed a new product. It's an additive for the oil industry. They need marketing. These are scientists. They need you. We were offered that job to head that company, their marketing division. About a week later, that job was pulled. I went to talk to this man. I said, what happened? He said, I can't talk to you, neither can my client. We had a church there called Crossroads Baptist Church, north part of Woodlands. $33 million a year budget, $3 million in excess. They heard our story. They said, we're going to help you. The house we sold in the Woodlands, we leased it back from the buyer so we didn't have to move our stuff. We couldn't pay rent. The church said, we're going to pay rent for you. We've got one of our parishioners that's in the oil and gas business, always looking for executives. We'll make sure that you meet him, probably can get a job there. We'll help move you into a smaller place. And then that didn't happen. It didn't happen because Eric Maddox, the guy that was the defense intelligence agent that had been in our home, preached as a lay preacher at that church that Sunday. And the church wouldn't talk to us anymore. I ended up having to sell a bunch of real rare tools to rebuild antique car engines and sold them for about 5 or 10 cents on the dollar to pay rent and utilities that month. And after 6 days, a gal that was a volunteer reception at the church finally spoke to us, and she said, you know, I'm sorry that we can't talk to you because the government has threatened us with a 7-year audit. It will cost us at least $500,000. We don't know you that well. We can't help you. None of us are supposed to talk to you.
Let's get to Benghazi. I'd like to shift over to Benghazi a little bit now. We have a lot of eyewitnesses to Benghazi, but one of our tribal leaders from the east, his son lived across the street from the mansion where Chris Stevens was killed. And the day of the event, he said they cordoned off a 5-kilometer area. He said it was no surprise. He said they knew this was going to happen. Also, there were no guards that day on that. He said every day there's guards on that. They're the Al-Qaeda guards, but they're guarding that area. It's a CIA safe house is what it was. And he said the cars that go in and out have Libyan license plates. There's never been a U.S. flag there ever. And he said when the first guns were fired, he said he was at a little store and he rushed back home, and he said they have kind of walls in front of their house with metal doors. He drove inside, and then he had another door. And he heard them talking, and he said they had strange accents. He said they weren't Libyan. There might have been a few Libyans amongst them, but he said they had different clothes and they had very ancient names. He said these radical Islamists, sometimes they'll take names that go back 1,000 years and nobody knows these names. And he said, I asked him, are you here to kill us? And he said, the man looked at him and said, no, we're not here to kill Libyans, we're here to kill Americans. And so he said, I stepped back and I didn't say anything else, but they went in and they blew up first thing he saw 2 cars. He said when he was coming back from the store, there were 2 vehicles that were leaving the back gate of that compound or that mansion. And he said it was completely full of white faces. He said both those cars left and were gone. He said
This would have been about 30 seconds after the first bullets were fired. He was getting milk and water at a 7-Eleven. He jumped in his car, drove back. And he lives right across the street, and as he was passing, these 2 cars were leaving the backside of this mansion. And it was full of white faces, and Chris Stevens wasn't in that bunch. Now, this is less than a minute after the first bullets were fired. So then after after the fighting gone on, they started to fire inside, etc. Then the fighting quelled, and the raiders were going in there, the looters, and they invited him to go in with them. So he kind of followed behind, and he said there were a couple of bodies there. There was one white guy in there, and he said they were abusing him. They were urinating on him, kicking him, and things like that. Nobody knew who he was until they drug him outside. That was Chris Stevens. So Chris Stevens was dead probably before the first shot was fired. Go figure that one out. We know what happened that night. Chris Stevens had dinner with the Turkish ambassador. The man serving them dinner was one of our tribal spies. So he heard the conversation, and Chris Stevens was appealing to the Turkish ambassador to help them get these 20,000 man-pad rockets back, because it's now a big, big problem with the U.S. signature on a bunch of rockets in the hands of the wrong people. And the Turkish ambassador told him no. He went out, the Turkish ambassador walked out the front door of that mansion, got in a car. He was taking the military base. He was putting a military aircraft, flown back to Turkey. When the plane sat down in Turkey, the three guys that were coordinating the attack started giving instructions to attack the building. Now, you'd think that somebody in this government, if they really want to know what went on, would talk to us or talk to the guys that we know that were over there on the ground. Not a one of them. Not any of our people ever been talked to.
The Libyan man who was across the street, the young man, he said, you have to consider what I saw. And he said, in a logical mind, you have to consider that Chris Stevens would have been in that car. But he wasn't. So he said it would make sense that he was already gone. He'd been assassinated. And if you think about the background of Hillary and Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton being a big gun runner, and maybe perhaps Chris Stevens had a falling out with them or whatever, he had huge amounts of information. You know, it goes back to people like Vince Foster for me. I mean, you know, you see these kind of events happen, and it was easy to blame it on an attack. Of course, we don't want to stop the attack because we want it to finish. That's why I think everybody was recalled. Until what happened recently.
Now then, JoAnne and I have been attacked. We've had that validated. And if you all don't believe that, call Pete Sessions' office. Talk to Lee Padilla, his chief of staff. Call him, ask him to validate who we are and what we had said is true. Dr. Corsi, before he ever wrote an article, they had 5 validating sources besides us, and he's written almost 30 articles, WorldNet Daily. The thing is, we are eyewitnesses to events. We shouldn't have been there. We shouldn't have seen that. But they have attacked us since we've gotten back. And the DVD we got, the first ones we produced, were full of pornography. How'd that happen? Luckily, we received them 2 days before the government asked us to sign an affidavit that there was no pornography in our DVD. So we shredded that first bunch. They have continued to attack us. Most recently, after the John Birch meeting in Houston, we were driving back to far southeast Texas, and we were on Highway 105, and the radar detector was following us, going off from the time we got on the highway. 70 miles, nonstop radar. We were not speeding, obviously, with the radar detector, and our GPS turns red when we're over the speed limit. Finally, when we turned north on 59, we were out in the middle of nowhere. 2 highway patrol cars stopped us. One of them with a dog in the back, the other car just a highway patroller. And he came to the window. I shouldn't have gotten out of the car. I did. He asked me to get in his car. I shouldn't have. Long and short, he said, I want to inspect your car.
He didn't ask for insurance. He didn't ask.
And I said, no, I'm not going to allow you to do that. And he said, then I'm taking the drug dog in there, because you're acting suspicious, and if I find any drugs, if the dog marks, he said, then I'm arresting you, or we're going to tear up your car and find the drugs. So they pulled JoAnne out of the car. She stood on the bar ditch over there, and I was over here. We were about 50 feet apart. And the dog went around the car twice. He never marked, never made any noise or anything. Finally, the guy's tapping the back window. And after he did that several times, then the dog jumped up and touched his hand. He did that about 15 times. And he said, well, the dog's marked for drugs. You're under arrest. And they began to go through our car. Now, JoAnne and I don't do drugs, never have.
Plus we're
First
targeted.
time I'd ever been arrested, I've never gotten a speeding ticket, all these things, you know. And being targeted individuals as we are, we would never, ever
Have any
risk
contraband.
anything with contraband or anything. You know, we don't carry an open beer in the car. And for 2.5 hours, this guy was out there. He had a cell phone in his ear the whole time. This is Texas Highway Patroller, or looked like one. And after 30 minutes or an hour, he was with his cell phone in his ear. He says, I'm there. He's talking to somebody the whole time. I'm there. They crawled underneath the car. Both those officers, the back of their uniforms were completely potty from going under the car so many times looking for drugs. And after 2.5 hours, they didn't find any drugs. This is another time God protected us. We'd had the oil changed that day at a Walmart, and the guy that changed the oil had tattoos from the back of his hands all the way up on both arms. Changed the oil, rotated the tires, and we were inside Walmart for about an hour. Probably that man found a surprise up underneath the fender and the frame and took it home with him because
God
there were
bless
no
him.
drugs in
He
our
was
car.
He was an angel of God that day.
So they've accelerated their attacks on us. What JoAnne thinks is that they wanted to arrest us and give us a get out of jail card free if we would become their agents and try to influence the Libyan tribes, the people who are trying to take their country back. We don't know that for sure, but there were no drugs in the car.
But we're assets to them. They have no inroads into the tribes of any country. They have a real hard time with that. And we are assets. And they don't destroy their assets, they control their assets. And since we give out their names and we tell what they did to us, they don't really like that. They'd really like to have us under their control.
Now, we need y'all to pray for us.
Let me say about Libya.
We need you to pray for us. We need you to buy our DVDs. The only way we're able to survive is with this because we can't get a job. Just a moment.
I wanted to tell you a little update on Libya. What's happened to Libya is first they installed a puppet president who ran off with $6 billion, and they installed a German spy, and he's out of there now. So Al-Qaeda has complete control of Libya, and there's no really government there. They consider it what they call a gray zone, meaning it's complete anarchy, and there's 20 Al-Qaeda camps inside Libya. The U.S., the UK, and France are fighting over who's going to fix Libya now, being that they broke it, and they broke it so far down that they know the Libyan people will probably agree to anything. So one of the reasons there's a Dr. Sung in Egypt who's put out a report 2 days ago who said the reason for the Benghazi investigation coming up again is he said this is going to be a reason why they need to go back into Libya and kill all the Al-Qaeda. He said they've been tracking Al-Qaeda forever there. They put Al-Qaeda in, they armed Al-Qaeda, they funded Al-Qaeda, they grew Al-Qaeda there, and now they're going to go take care of Al-Qaeda. The French would like to do it too, and the French have taken 3,000 French soldiers to the 3 borders in the south, Algeria, Niger, and Chad, because there's no borders, and they have a big problem with Al-Qaeda moving weapons back and forth across the border. So the French are fighting to take a piece of Libya too.
Thank you all. We've run way over. Excuse us for being so long-winded. Ma'am, you had a question?
Yes, is all this information on your DVD?
Most of it, except the later stuff, isn't, but the DVD's 3 hours long. It's got a lot of information. The fact-finding commission that we were head of, there's a full movie on that. It's our long... Ma'am?
If we got this into some of the congressmen's hands.
We've talked to all the congressmen. I can promise you
Pete
there's not any of
Sessions had it. They
them.
all
Pete Sessions had it. He verified it. None of the congressmen want to know anything about it.
Well, is Pete doing anything?
No, ma'am.
No.
He plausible
We told him,
deniability.
He said, we know that you got this information. What are you going to do with it?
They don't want it.
Would-
They don't want it.
Could we force him to do?
No, ma'am. You can try.
You could try.
You can
They
try.
might come and threaten you though too.
How much are your DVDs?
$15.
Checks out to.
AIT.
Avalon International Trusteeship, AIT.
Just write AIT.
There's
That's all you
little,
have to
you
do.
can zip a credit card. They're $15. Buy 1 or 2 or a dozen, pass them out to your friends. You know, our story is real gripping. We are
Google
eyewitnesses.
that.
We're the only ones there. You can go to our website. JoAnne updates it all the time. There's 20 or 30 pages on our website. There's a lot of information. We need your support. And if you don't buy a DVD, be sure and keep us in your
We're on
prayers.
radio shows too.
Yes, sir.
Trey Gowdy, the Republican congressman from South Carolina, is now the head of the investigation for Benghazi. He's quite outspoken. Do you think there's any...
We've tried to reach him.
We tried to contact him
But
20
you
or 30
can't- you
times,
can't get
haven't
through the
recently.
gatekeepers.
But, you know, the thing is, we have all the details, and we will be more than happy to put them in touch with eyewitnesses that are not on their agenda, not paid by the CIA. They have not been willing to talk to any of those people. And we have information that should be of interest to somebody in this government. It's not.
We tried to.
Sir.
Question. I may be very dense. I'm going to walk away from here going, I still can't connect the dots. Why does the government not want to get into this any further?
Because they're all big government people. They were bought and paid for by the bankers, the One World Order guys.
They don't want to know about the gun running.
They don't want to know about the gun running. You know, those are all criminal offenses. The gold bag dinar would destroy the toilet paper bankers. You can forget Fed, Euroclear, you can forget all the Rothschild banking group if there was a gold backed currency for the continent of Africa. So, you know, the Congress is bought and paid for.
Also,
Yes,
Obama
sir.
said-
Could you tell everyone clearly your website?
It's www.libyanwarthetruth.com. I've given everybody a card. It's on there. It's also on our DVD.
I wanted to say one thing to him. You remember at the end of the Libyan war, Obama said, it's been a great success. This is our Libyan model. We're going to do this in other countries now. Well, there's been no success in Libya. It's been a complete debacle, and probably for a reason. They wanted to destroy Libya, but they don't want that out. They don't want it known that the U.S. taxpayers to know that we armed and funded Al-Qaeda, that we bombed 60,000 bombing raids over a country that couldn't even put a weapon in the air. I mean, there's so much hidden there. The more you investigate, the more you find, and Chris Stevens was the gun runner. He was CIA before he was an ambassador. Obama, Clinton, all of them, they want that hidden. There's not any way they want that out.
Well, is that all on the tape so we can spread it?
Yes, ma'am. There's more than 3 hours of information in there. There's the video of our fact-finding commission is on there. Our long dissertation, there's the proof from Dennis Kucinich, an interview where he outs the Arab Spring. It was all a wag the dog event. There's lots and lots and lots of information on there. You know, we could literally give you a dissertation that lasted days, but you know, we encourage you to buy the DVD. That'll help us. Go to our website. The website's free. There's information in there every day. The Libyan tribal leaders contact us, offering new intelligence all the time. Yes, sir.
It would seem to me that since they're bringing hundreds to thousands of Al-Qaeda or Islamists into the United States with the complicity of this government, it would seem to me that it's up to each of us to guarantee our own survival and perhaps become what they call survivalists or preppers. Because if that's going to
That's the thing that scares me to death, and I'm fearless. There is no good reason for these radical Islamists, these head-chopping psychopaths, to be coming in here with the full support of the State Department in thousands every month, funded with $4 million each. There's no good reason for that. Yes, sir.
Well, there's no good reason to, why do you think they're doing this?
Well, I can speculate. I think that they're planning to, one day, declare martial law to get all our guns, and who better to go take our guns away from us at gunpoint than a bunch of psychopathic Al-Qaeda murderers who wouldn't care at all about killing us.
Yeah, our military may not do it.
And, you know, they've compromised the military. They're trying to compromise the police and everybody else. And the thing that stops the One World Order people is there's 200 million citizens of this country that are armed. And they've taken away guns all over the world. It's the only place left. So why would they be doing that? That's a question you need to be asking yourself. There's no good reason for that. But, you know, as I told the intelligence agencies, it's real easy to find out who they are, because you could look at every Libyan that comes in this country since 2011, October 2011. If they've got a bank account with $4 million, they're a bad guy. No, they can't do that. That's profiling. But they've attacked us. Let me tell you what, JoAnne and I were very substantial people. We lost over $200 million in Libya. And if they can destroy us like we've done, like they've done to us, then they can do it to anybody. We're good folks. We've had our own nonprofit. We plowed all our money back into our business. We're good people. But they've destroyed us. So if they can destroy us, I can guarantee you, y'all are all targets. Please pray for us. Thank you so much.
Take one more question.
Yes, sir. One more question, I was told.
There aren't any more questions.
I think we've answered the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Turn this off, or do you want to? Okay.
Anybody believe in conspiracy? Ample evidence. Of all the dramatic programs we've had, this is the most dramatic we've ever had. So I want to thank the Moriartys for their courage, for their faith, for the keeping on, keeping on. This battle is far from over, folks, but this is just more proof that what we've been saying for 50 years is true. So I hope you'll buy those DVDs and use them as well as you can. I want to mention, is Regina still here?
No, she never made it today.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to introduce her, but I'm glad you mentioned her. She's a wonderful lady who's done a lot of good, including introducing them to us. Thanks so much for coming. We'll see you next month.